Hello and welcome to Off the Field and Screens, the Detroit Way, a Detroit sports podcast. I'm your host, Chad Marriott, and this week we're going to be short and not so sweet. Let's jump in and talk about the Pistons. They had 3 straight double-digit wins against bad teams, but everybody was like, oh, they're back, they're blowing these guys out, they're playing hard. So it was hard to judge. But they did play harder. So I was like, it could go either way. And then we see how they play against Toronto, a playoff team, and they looked terrible for a large chunk of the game. They had a stretch where they really put it together, went on a big run. But the problem is, I think the major problem for them is that they're not playing as hard. They're getting beat on things like offensive rebounds. They got way out rebounded. Offensive rebounds, way more than normal, that they gave up against the Raptors tonight. They had more turnovers than Toronto, so they're not playing disciplined. They're not finishing plays. They just look sloppy and are just getting flat out outplayed by Toronto. Toronto played well. It's not like the Pistons just were awful and lost the game, but they did not. The Pistons did not play up to the standard that they had set for the majority of this season. I think a few things to note is it looks like Danis Jenkins. I didn't see him on the injury report, so big question would be, why did he not play tonight against Toronto? This afternoon, I should say. He's had a stretch. In the last 5 games, he's had double-digit scoring twice, both times against Brooklyn. Against Memphis, he was 1 for 4 from the field, 7 assists, but it just doesn't feel like he's creating that same impact. And I think that JB Bickerstaff is looking for someone to create some impact. And Jenkins now isn't being judged as, oh, what a feel-good story. They moved on in part from Jaden Ivey, in part because of Jenkins' emergence. They felt comfortable that they had that ball handler to come off the bench and really change the tempo and give that second unit a lot of energy. And he struggled. So much so that you're seeing Marcus Sasser and Kevin Huerter really get a tryout to be somebody to spark the second unit offensively. And I think that Sasser has had some good scoring games. He's played well. Out of the 2, or I guess those 3 players I just named, I do expect Sasser to get the most consistent minutes going forward because he has played the best. Shooting well in most games, presents a threat, and he's treated like a threat out on the 3-point line, as opposed to Kevin Huerter, who is not. But the problem with both Huerter and Sasser is neither of them is really like somebody that can run an offense, somebody that can generate offense for others. I think that Huerter is a really good basketball player. Everything other than outside shooting, he's really, really good at. So they're really still looking for answers. I think missing Isaiah Stewart in this game against Toronto really hurt, especially the rebounding and the defensive energy. But something's got to change where this team isn't up for games. They start out the first, 3 or 4 minutes of this game, they just looked like, are we playing basketball already? Like, what's going on? Kevin Huerter still shooting around 21%. In his last 5, let's go last 6. Tonight he shot 1 for 3 from the 3-point line. They were talking about, his last 2 games before that he had double digits, which is great because I do think he's a good scorer. But they brought him here to shoot threes, and he's been 2 for 6, 2 for 7, 1 for 4, 0 for 4, 1 for 4. I guess that 21%, I think last week when we talked, it was closer to like 11. So, he doubled it. I still I don't think you have to believe that Jaden Ivey was going to be an all-world NBA, multiple time all-star, all this junk to say that this wasn't a good trade. Especially when it seems like they didn't pull the trigger on some trades last season that maybe would have been better. And I know hindsight's 2020. How do you know he's going to get hurt? How do you know it's going to take this long to recover from an injury, so on, etc.? How do you know the Pistons are going to make this big a jump record-wise? I don't know. But, as far as, what value you got for a 5th overall pick, a 23-year-old is just... And it doesn't have... I don't think you have to believe that Jaden Ivey was going to be an all-star. I also don't... I'm not trying to tear down and say that Kevin Huerter isn't a good basketball player. I feel like if you were going to do anything, they needed to do something that was going to make a more positive impact for the Pistons going forward. Looking at, they weren't all in on Brandon Ingram last year, and now I'm thinking, watching him play a couple times this season, that's exactly the type of player the Pistons need. Somebody that can get a bucket. And he can get his shot off, so... that's going to be something in the offseason they're going to have to look at. I don't think they need another superstar. Brandon Ingram is like a 1 year all-star, 1 year not all-star. He's not like somebody that's a shoo-in, the dude that's going to be, in the all-star game every year. But he's been consistently good scorer, and I think the Pistons need somebody that can get a bucket. Tobias Harris, has played well as of late. But I think that lineup construction of having, the 3-point specialist in Robinson, who I think is more than that. He plays well off the screens, plays well off the screen, etc. But I think he might be more suited to like a 6-man role. And then you have Asar Thompson, who is a defensive dynamo. But offensively is still trying to find what his thing is, because he can't shoot, so they play so far off of him. And occasionally he can get to the bucket really nice, but he has to work really hard for that, because there's just no respect at all for him to shoot even at 15 feet. Duran's the perfect complement, like big man, finishing around the rim runner for Cade, and then you have Harris, who's kind of a that solid go get a bucket guy, but he's not elite at it. So I think that when offensively, just the combinations they have there, you can say, well, Duncan's in because he shoots threes really well. He spreads the floor. Asar's in because he plays defense really well, and Harris can go get that bucket really well. I think that you need... I guess what I'm saying here is we're describing all these guys as complementary players, but do you need one more guy in that lineup that is an A-plus player, I guess, or a B-plus player, not a excels in this one thing, if that makes sense. I almost feel like they need another elite player, or a different combination of players in that lineup. I'm not really sure how you mix it up. I think that very likely one of those three, between Harris, Thompson, and Robinson, that there's got to be like a significant upgrade and have one of those guys become a bench player in the future, or if you were looking at that at the deadline. And it's not that I wanted to get rid of any of them. I like all of those players a lot. But if they're trying to be a contender and not still developing, which I think they believe that they're still developing, the organization, by the way that they approach the deadline. But if you think you're a contender, you needed to make a big upgrade at one of those spots and maybe change that lineup a little bit in some way. All right, let's move on to the Red Wings. That was a rough week with all the injuries. Larkin's down, and then Andrew Kopp goes down, Michael Rasmussen's down, Michael Branson-Nygaard goes down, and they have this line of call-ups, several call-ups in the, for the bottom six. I think it was four. Spent the majority of the Red Wings bottom six right now. Spent the majority of the season in Grand Rapids, because it's that one line is Shine, Dries, and maybe they got JVR with him. But anyway, and then Leonard was out the other night too, John Leonard. And one thing I will say about these Grand Rapids players that came up, they are really outworking a few of the guys that Todd McClellan referred to as jerseys, and I think we all know who these players are. The way that they played against Dallas, just totally outmatched, and were able to steal a point, which is a massive point at this point in the season. I think it shows how desperately that there's got to be a major shakeup in the bottom six for the Red Wings this offseason. I think there's a few. There's three players I think that. Oh, Appleton was in that lineup. Yeah. Anyway, a few of those guys need in that bottom six. It's just time to say that's enough. Enough's enough. Even if you have to eat some contract, it's just not sustainable. If you want to take the next step, if you want to move from the rebuilding phase to the starting to get to the playoffs phase. The Florida. Okay, so let's just quickly, losing to the Lightning. I mean, they just felt outmatched. I think a lot of the guys, again, those Grand Rapids guys and a few others really stepped up and played really hard. They just looked outmatched, and they were. The Florida loss is just inexcusable. Losing the way they did, even with the injuries, cannot happen to a team expecting to make the playoffs. Just cannot happen. And I know it's easy to sit here in my, on my couch, my chair, or whatever, and say, oh, you guys got to do better than that. They have to do better than that. They want to make the playoffs. It's just plain and simple. Giving up that lead and then, letting them get the tying goal and then not being able to even muster up enough to get to overtime and hold on to at least 1 point. I mean, it just felt like the season was over. And, sometimes people talk, they'll say, well, you can't do the analytics on a talking point like being soft. And I really sometimes worry that this makeup of the Red Wings, they're just maybe soft, not physically, but maybe mentally. I don't know. That's why, speaking of, great to have David Perron back. He does not take crap from anybody. Sorry, something with dog and cat happened out there. He doesn't take crap from anybody. He's really good at protecting the puck. And he's tough, and he faces up to guys when the Red Wings need them to. He doesn't fail the punk test like some of these players on the Red Wings do. When his teammate gets cross-checked or whatever, he's right up in the mix. And on the broadcast, I get it. They don't want him to take a excessive penalty for fighting or whatever, extending extracurriculars. And I don't know. Maybe I don't care. I'm so tired of seeing Red Wings players just get blatantly cross-checked, etc., and not doing anything in response. Nobody's stepping up and standing up for their teammates. All right, so let's move on to the Lions. A plethora of additions. I'm probably missing some in this list. I'm going off of what's been officially reported on the Lions website. Tyler Conklin, Trevor Nowalski, Christian Isian, Isaiah Pacheco, Tom Kennedy, Cade Mays, Larry Borum, and that takes us back to and the releasing Josh Pascal, which is just unfortunate. The injuries, and you use I think a second round pick on that, and it just the potential was clearly there, but disappointing for that to happen. The offensive line. I know some people are like, oh, those guys aren't that good, or oh, those guys are great. I don't know. With offensive line, it's so tricky and so scheme based, and just got to see them out there. I know that's a lame sports analyst thing to do. Let's see what happens. I think that for the Lions' offensive line and the changes they're making, we just need to see what happens. I don't think we're going to be able to sit here and say, oh yeah, or oh no, with any real accuracy. I think you're seeing some depth moves. Adding Pacheco at the contract that they got him at could be a pretty sneaky good move. Obviously, he's not David Montgomery, but he runs really hard, and he could complement Gibbs pretty well. I think that Tyler Conklin, adding a tight end, I think that they've had a number of tight ends that are just hurt every single season. So the Lions making a decision to get somebody that's a little older, maybe not as talented as some of these other players that they have at that position, but believe they can trust that come December he's still on the roster, healthy and playing. I think that's maybe a decision with a number of guys. I think I've noticed that they play most of the time. The Marcus Davenport note maybe was heard loud and clear, but a lot of people are really worried. A number of really good players have signed away, including a couple of good defensive linemen, and they haven't done anything to replace that depth, and it feels a lot like they're going to go into the draft hoping that they can do that. And then, of course, internal development. Now, I'm always the biggest cheerleader for internal development, especially with what the Pistons have done, what the Red Wings have done with some of their players, and the Tigers. I'm a big internal development guy. And even the Lions over the years. But last year, they really counted on internal development and players to step up into roles that they hadn't been in before, and that did not quite happen, which is why they floated in at just above 500. This season, if they rely on it again, they're putting a big bet on the season on some of these second-year players or rookies, really stepping up and filling these roles, which is what happened early in this Lions, resurgence. I don't know. So we'll see. I think that the question is, do they need to do something that really moves the needle? Are the Lions at the point where they need to go from saying that we're stocking up, building, and now we're going to go, we're just, riding this out, seeing what happens, to, do they need to make something, not something panicky or something crazy, but do they need to add a needle-shifting player instead of, minor upgrades and fill-ins and hoping the draft really hits again? And then we're just going to finish up real quick with the Tigers. Spring training continues. Everything is pretty much as expected. I think maybe some bullpen and, the last two guys, something could happen that makes people go, oh, that was unexpected. Although it feels kind of expected now. But we'll see. And then Kevin McGonigal feels like more of a possibility than ever before. At the beginning of spring training, I thought 0 chance that he would go straight from Double-A to the majors. But, he's doing everything he possibly can. And, the Tigers really could use somebody to hit the ball a little better. I think that they're at the point where a lot of these defensive pluses and positional versatility needs to give way to somebody that can hit. And then maybe doesn't have the defensive plus and doesn't have the positional versatility. And it's like, well, they can hit. I know that they can be in the lineup every day because I know that, they're going to have good at bats and they're not going to strike out a lot. They're going to get on base. So that would be the hope with Kevin McGonigal. And that is all we have this week. So we're on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Please listen like you already are, and subscribe, leave a comment, tell me that you think I'm a sports genius or you think I'm a moron. Either one, as long as you back it up, I don't care. All right, that'll be it. Thank you for listening. This is the Detroit Way.